When I was 20, my neighbor Tila and I went out for groceries on a Saturday. The heat was sticky and awful, so we stuck to the shady side of the street. We were just talking about nothing special when a cardboard sign on the curb swung sideways in a burst of hot wind. It had the word "sale" scribbled in big, crooked letters with a dried-out marker. We both loved flea markets and random yard sales. No second thoughts, we turned and followed the sign. There was a white arrow drawn in chalk on the pavement, pointing toward a narrow driveway. At the end of it stood a single-story red brick house, kind of run down. The windows were completely covered in brown paper, taped up tight from the inside. Not just one or two. Every single one. Looked like maybe they were doing renovations or didn't want the sun to get in. There was a fresh A4 sheet taped to the front door that read, "Come in. Everything must go." The ink was still bold, like it had been printed that morning. Tila looked at me and raised her eyebrows. I shrugged. It felt weird, yeah, but not threatening. It was daytime, middle of a busy neighborhood, other houses around. No reason to think anything was wrong. I pushed the door open, and it creaked like in a movie, slow and a little too loud for how light my hand had been. Inside, it smelled like wet drywall and fresh plaster. The kind of chemical damp you get in basements when someone's trying to patch up walls. The air was cooler than outside, but not in a good way. More like the coolness of old, shut-in rooms. The hallway was narrow, and the walls were streaked with damp patches that glistened under the single bare bulb overhead. It flickered once as we stepped in, then steadied. The place was mostly empty. No tables, no shelves of stuff for sale. There were shadows on the dusty floor where furniture had once been, like ghosts of old couches and chairs. You could tell from the clean outlines in the dust. I figured the owner hadn't finished setting up yet. Maybe we were just early. Tila laughed and shouted, "Hello? Where are your discounts?" Her voice bounced off the walls, echoing too many times for such a small house. There was no answer. We walked a bit further in, stepping around random paint buckets and a couple of old extension cords. In the corridor, I noticed footprints, boot prints, leading deeper into the house. They were fresh. The dust hadn't settled back yet. I told myself they belonged to a contractor, or maybe the person organizing the sale. We passed a room with plastic sheeting on the floor, but nothing inside. It looked like a bedroom, stripped down to bare boards and stained drywall. In another room, there was a metal folding chair turned on its side, like someone had left in a hurry or didn't care to clean up. We kept following the hallway until we reached the very back of the house. That's when we heard a sound. A quiet, mechanical click. Like the sound of a door lock turning. Not loud, but close. Definitely from just ahead. We both stopped at once. Tila gave me this wide-eyed look, half grinning like it was a joke. I think we both thought the same thing. Probably the realtor locking up, maybe realizing people had wandered in early. We didn't say anything, just stood still, waiting to hear another noise. Nothing came. A second door clicked shut, louder this time, and then everything went still. The house suddenly felt airtight, like the air had been sucked out. A second later, the front door slammed with a force that couldn't have come from a draft. I turned and ran back down the hallway, heart hammering, and grabbed the doorknob. It turned loosely, without resistance. The outside handle was gone. Not broken, not stuck, completely removed. A clean hole where it should have been. Someone had locked us in. But why? There was nothing inside. No furniture, no sale. Just an empty shell of a house. Tila pulled out her phone. "No signal," she said, frowning. "Nothing at all." I checked mine too. 0 bars. No Wi-Fi either. It was like the house was sealed from the world. That's when I noticed the faint hum, like the low buzz of an electronic device hidden somewhere. A signal jammer. Someone didn't want us calling for help. Then we heard it. Heavy footsteps above us. Not fast or panicked. Slow, careful, deliberate. Someone was in the attic, pacing. Pausing between steps, as if listening. Judging something. Maybe waiting. Panic scraped at my throat, but I forced it down. "The bathroom window," I whispered. "Remember? It was cracked open a bit." Tila nodded, already moving. The footsteps moved again. This time toward the stairs. We sprinted. I shoved open the bathroom door and grabbed the window frame. It was one of those old horizontal sliders, barely wide enough for a person. We pushed together, hard, and the frame popped out of the track with a snap. No time to be quiet. I threw my leg through, scraping it on the sill, and landed on damp grass outside. Tila came right after me. We didn't stop to breathe. In the backyard, hidden behind two overflowing trash bins, we crouched and tried to make sense of what we were seeing. A white sedan was parked by the side gate. No license plates. The hood was still warm, faint wisps of steam rising in the sunlight. The engine had been shut off only minutes ago. A man stood near the car, dressed too neatly for someone working in a half-gutted house. Black slacks, gray jacket, clean shoes. He wasn't looking at us. He was scanning the street with slow, casual turns of his head, like he was waiting for someone or watching for something. He held a folder. Even from a distance, I could see the photos clipped to the front. Color pictures of smiling couples standing in front of that same brick house. Different people, different days. Some looked recent. One had balloons. Another, a sold sign propped next to the door. I tapped 911 on my phone again. This time, it connected. I whispered the address. The line was thin, quiet, like talking through cotton, but it worked. Then the man heard something. Maybe my voice, or the faint click of the call starting. He froze, turned his head sharply toward the bins. His eyes narrowed. He dropped the folder. In one motion, he sprinted for the car, yanked open the door, and slid behind the wheel. We jumped from behind the bins and ran for the street, hoping to get away from the driveway. I was trying to memorize the house numbers nearby, anything to tell the cops later. The white car roared to life. Tires squealed. It sped past us so close the mirror nearly clipped my shoulder. We barely made it to the curb. I turned just in time to see the back of the car blur into the street, the taillights bright in the sunlight, disappearing down the block. No plate, no logo, just gone. The only camera nearby was on a tiny shop across the street, an old surveillance box aimed half blindly toward the road. It caught a smudge of movement, just the back of the car fading into the distance. Police came quick. Sirens cut through the heat maybe 4 minutes after the call. They took us seriously at first. Young women locked in a house, strange man fleeing the scene, possible kidnapping attempt. But as we told the full story, I saw their expressions start to shift. Confused, skeptical. They went inside and looked around, said it looked like a space being prepped for staging. Temporary stands, some work lights, a couple props still packed in boxes. The living room had a folding table set up, and a few color brochures, like the place was about to be shown for sale. One officer mentioned it's a trick some real estate people use to fake interest in a property, make it look like buyers are lining up so they can raise the price. But even he admitted, doesn't explain the locked door or why someone jammed your phones. Nobody could. No fingerprints matched anyone in their systems. No one claimed the property. The folder with the photos, clean fingerprints only. Probably wiped. I kept it. I don't know why. They let me, since it technically wasn't evidence of a crime. It's still under my bed. A stack of smiling couples, all posing outside that same ugly red brick house. They all looked happy, proud, like they had just bought their first home. But the photos stopped at the 4th page. The rest of the folder was blank. I don't follow sidewalk signs anymore. Doesn't matter how desperate I am for a good deal. If I see chalk arrows or hand-drawn posters, I keep walking. Whatever's for sale, it's not worth ending up in a locked box with no signal and someone pacing above your head. Sometimes at night, I stare at the folder and wonder, if that bathroom window had been sealed, who would have been the next couple smiling in the photo? Last April, our school's accounting department organized a charity sale to support a local youth foundation. I volunteered as the nurse on duty in case anyone fainted from heat or exhaustion. It was a Saturday, warm for the season, and the school gym smelled like folding chairs, old floor polish, and cheap plastic tablecloths. Most of the action had happened in the morning. Parents picking through baby clothes, kids trying on donated roller skates, and teachers sneaking baked goods into their tote bags. By early afternoon, the rush was over. The crowd had thinned, and the tables looked picked over. I stood near the folding chairs by the first aid table, sipping from a bottle of water, mostly watching people shuffle past the book section or dig through the DVDs. That's when I noticed a porcelain tea set sitting at the far end of one of the longer tables. Blue trim, delicate handle curves, slight gloss on the white finish. I didn't even have to touch it to recognize the pattern. It was the same kind my grandmother used every Sunday morning when we were kids. My heart jumped a little, stupidly. There was a torn yellow tag tied to the box handle. $20, full set. I walked straight over and picked up the box. It wasn't heavy, but the pieces inside clinked against one another when I tilted it toward my chest. I held it like something fragile and expensive, like it would disappear if I didn't secure it right away. I started toward the cash box table, carefully weaving through leftover picture frames and baskets of tangled cords. Just as I reached the end of the table row, I heard a man clear his throat behind me. I turned and saw Mr. Clyde, the history teacher, with his thin white hair combed straight back and his always wrinkled collar. He looked serious. He reached one hand toward the box I was holding and said, "That set's mine." I didn't move. "It was on the table. I just picked it up," I said. "I set it aside this morning," he said, not blinking. "I only stepped out to get cash." I looked down at the box in my arms. "It wasn't marked as reserved," I said. "I'm really sorry, but I thought it was up for grabs." He didn't answer. Instead, he placed his hand on the box and tugged. Not hard, but firm. I held tighter. "Please," I said, still trying to keep it polite. "I already have it in my hands. I was just going to pay." His expression tightened. The skin near his mouth twitched like he wanted to say more, but he didn't. He pulled again, this time with more force. "I already picked it up," I repeated, my voice lower. He stepped closer, and his voice rose. "I told you I set it aside. Someone must have put it back on the table by mistake." A few heads turned. The gym wasn't loud anymore, and his voice carried. One of the math teachers glanced over from the raffle booth. I felt the tension rise. Not panic, just that itchy pressure of being watched while something awkward was happening. I looked toward the front where Principal Haddock stood with the volunteer log sheet. He noticed the commotion and came over. "What's the trouble here?" he asked. Mr. Clyde answered fast. "I placed this item aside this morning. She took it off the table just now." I spoke right after him. "It was sitting with the rest of the unsold stuff. I didn't see any note or tag. I have it now, and I'm ready to pay." The principal paused for a second, looked at the box, then back at both of us. "Why not flip a coin for it?" I almost agreed, but Mr. Clyde didn't even glance at him. His fingers tightened on the box's edge, and he pulled harder. "That won't be necessary," he said. I held on tighter, shifting my stance so the box was pressed against my stomach, my arms over it like a shield. "The money helps the kids," I said, looking at him. "Whoever buys it, the school gets the same amount. That's what matters, right?" He stared at me like I'd insulted him. "You young people don't value anything real anymore." Then he yanked. Not hard enough to break the box open, but enough to jolt me back a step. I instinctively pulled in return. The whole box rocked, the porcelain inside clinking louder now. I gripped the sides, trying to keep it level. My foot hit the corner of a stack of unsorted blankets. I didn't fall, but it shifted my balance. Mr. Clyde's knuckles had gone white from how tightly he was holding the box flap. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw one of the student volunteers, Alyssa, the girl from the yearbook club. She had a camera raised, and she was already snapping pictures. Probably thought it was funny. Two adults fighting over charity junk like kids in a sandbox. I wanted to let go just to end it, but I couldn't make myself do it. Something about how he spoke, like it was his by birthright, made it feel like giving up would be the same as saying he was right. The pressure between us got worse. Neither of us said anything else. It was just both of us gripping the box tighter and tighter, with the teacups rattling louder each second. I don't know if he saw the camera too, but he must have. His face twisted in this angry, tight way like he wasn't just holding the box anymore. He was trying to prove something. The box jerked again. My fingers were numb from the strain, and my ears filled with the loud thump of my heartbeat, like someone had plugged it into the gym speakers. The box groaned under the pressure. I heard the thin crack of cardboard giving out, then the high-pitched rattle of porcelain plates clashing together inside. I didn't loosen my grip, and neither did he. Then Mr. Clyde suddenly jerked back hard, pulling his side of the box with him. His foot landed on a crumpled plastic bag that someone had dropped near the table earlier. I gasped, but didn't have time to react. His body tilted backward, and he lost balance. I saw the whole fall happen like in slow motion. He clutched the box to his chest as if trying to save it, even while his feet skidded out. His shoulder clipped the table edge with a dull thud, and then a louder sound filled the gym. A harsh, snapping crunch, followed immediately by the sharp crackle of porcelain exploding against tile. His elbow had taken the hit. I watched the pieces of china burst through the side of the box, shards spinning out as he collapsed onto the floor. Then the blood came. It wasn't a slow trickle. A sudden red spray hit the white tiles under him, spreading fast. I saw a deep, jagged cut across his wrist, where the broken porcelain had sliced clean through. His hand opened and closed weakly, already turning pale. The noise of the crowd faded into a low static as everyone stepped back in shock. It all happened in seconds, but my body didn't move until someone behind me shouted. I dropped to my knees beside him, shaking off the shock. My training took over. I ripped open the red first aid kit, pulled out gauze, wrapped it tight around the bleeding wrist. The fabric soaked through instantly. I pressed harder, trying to stop the flow, but it just kept coming. The floor under his arm was slick and warm. His eyes blinked slowly, unfocused. I looked up for help, but everyone had backed away like he'd exploded. 8 minutes passed before the ambulance arrived. To me, it felt like hours. I kept switching bandages, pressing new layers into the wound. Mr. Clyde's skin turned pale gray. One of the paramedics said the radial artery was cut, and he'd lost too much blood. They tried to stabilize him on the floor, then wheeled him out. He never spoke a word. That night, I got a call from the hospital. He didn't make it. He died without regaining consciousness. The police interviewed me first. It made sense. There were plenty of witnesses, and the entire gym had seen the struggle. A few people even filmed it. The girl with the camera, Alyssa, turned in her photos and short video to the authorities. The local news aired it that same evening. They showed the moment we both pulled on the box, then the stumble, the fall, the blood. I watched it once and felt like I was watching strangers. The headline called us two obsessed over dishes, like we were characters in some ridiculous joke. The investigation ruled it an accident. There was no intention, no plan, just a chain of stubborn, stupid actions that escalated into tragedy. That was the phrase one detective used. Stubborn, stupid actions. I signed a written statement. Nobody charged me with anything. Still, the calm didn't last. The next morning, I found an envelope in my mailbox. No return address, just a single sheet of paper folded once. On it was written, "Blood on your hands is as fragile as porcelain." I froze in my doorway. The note was handwritten, black pen, block letters. No name. No explanation. I didn't tell anyone. I wanted to believe it was a sick prank. But the letters kept coming. Every Monday. Sometimes typed, sometimes clipped from newspapers. One had a photo from the news report, printed in grainy black and white with red ink scribbled across my face. Another had an obituary for Mr. Clyde with just one sentence underlined. He taught with passion until his final day. That one made my knees give out. I reported the letters twice. Police said there was no clear threat, just vague messages. Nothing actionable. They filed it away and told me to stay aware. That was it. I changed my address a month later. Then my job. Then my hair. I even stopped going to the grocery store near the school, just in case I'd run into someone who remembered me. Still, every time a glass breaks, I jump. My muscles lock up like it's happening all over again. Now, I don't argue over objects. I don't raise my voice at checkout counters or defend my spot in a line. If someone wants something, they can have it. No item is worth more than what happened that day. It's not about guilt. It's about understanding how fast things can fall apart when pride gets involved. My mistake wasn't that I pulled on that box. It was that I needed to be right, in front of people, with a camera pointing at me. Pride is faster than help. That's the part I didn't know. If you ever feel a moment turning into a tug of war, let go first. Anything you hold in your hands is cheaper than someone else's blood. Last summer, I rented a small room in another state and decided to get rid of everything extra before the move. My apartment was already half empty when I set up 2 folding tables in the front yard and pulled out all the boxes I had marked to sell. I gave some handwritten price tags to a couple of friends who came to help, and by 9 a.m., we opened what was basically a yard sale. The morning started off easy, just neighbors and random people walking up, browsing. A young couple bought some chairs, said they were just moving in around the corner. A guy grabbed a box of old books I didn't even think anyone would want. 2 little kids ran straight to the pile of plastic Lego blocks and started digging through with their sticky hands. I kept the tone light, joked with people, smiled even when someone tried to bargain too hard. I wasn't trying to make a profit. The goal was to clear out as much as possible and get enough cash to fill up my car and make it to the new job. It was supposed to be 2 tanks worth, and I figured I'd hit that if I sold most of the decent stuff. By late morning, it was getting hot. The kind of heat that makes the air shimmer off the pavement. The cheap plastic sign I taped to the mailbox was starting to peel off. I moved a big cardboard box with random shoes under the patio umbrella so they wouldn't get too hot or warped. One pair in that box stood out, almost new flip-flops, brand name, with a tag that said $8. I'd worn them once to the beach. They were good quality, soft sole, still smelled like rubber. But for some reason, more people asked about them than anything else on the tables. First, it was a teenage girl who picked them up, tried them on, asked if I'd take $3. I told her $5 was the lowest. She put them back. Then a guy in running gear picked them up, asked what brand they were, nodded, and left. By noon, the flip-flops had been handled like 10 times, but still weren't sold. I was sitting behind the table, sipping from a warm bottle of water, when a woman in a bright pink windbreaker came straight toward me. The jacket was zipped all the way up to her neck, even though it had to be at least 90 degrees out. She looked like she was sweating but didn't care. Her face was tight, eyes narrow, like she was already pissed off before she even saw the shoes. She didn't say hi. Just reached into the box, pulled out the flip-flops, and started turning them over in her hands. She frowned at the price tag. "Too much," she said flatly. "I'll give you $1." I told her as politely as I could that the price was kind of symbolic. These were name brand, barely used, cheaper than coffee. She didn't even blink. Started pointing at the sole, saying it looked scuffed, said the stitching was crooked, that flip-flops like that weren't even in style anymore. Her voice was sharp, loud, not yelling exactly, but loud enough that people nearby were turning to look. I glanced behind her. The line at my table had grown. 2 older women holding lamps, a man with a stack of DVDs, a teenage girl looking at my blender. I tried to keep my tone calm, told her I was busy and she should decide quickly or make space for the next person. Her lips curled. She threw the flip-flops back onto the table so hard they bounced. "Hope you go broke," she said, loud and clear. Then she turned and walked off, still muttering something under her breath. I didn't say anything, just watched her go, then turned back to count the coins in my little cash box. About half an hour later, I heard a commotion on the sidewalk that made me lift my head. Same pink windbreaker. She was coming back, but this time she wasn't alone. Walking next to her was a tall man in a sleeveless hoodie, arms crossed over his chest. He had that kind of casual walk people have when they're trying to look like they don't care, but his eyes were scanning everything. He looked over the tables, the layout of the yard, like he was sizing it up. His expression didn't change. The woman didn't waste a second. She jabbed her finger at the box of shoes. "These," she said loud and clear. "You're selling them for $1. I'm not asking anymore. You will sell them, or you'll have a problem." The people browsing around us suddenly went quiet. Some took a step back. A couple turned and walked away, not wanting to be involved. I felt the shift right away. What had been a casual morning turned heavy, tense. The man stepped forward, just a little closer to the table, and spoke in a low voice. "Trade inspection can fine you more than $8, you know. You even got a permit for this?" My mouth went dry. I hadn't thought about that. My hands were resting on the table, and I noticed they were sticking slightly, damp with sweat. For a second, I considered just handing over the shoes and being done with it. But then something stopped me. It wasn't just about the flip-flops anymore. It was the way they stood there, like they were used to this kind of move, like they'd done it before. I looked past them, trying to stay calm. Sarah, my neighbor, had been sitting on the second folding chair behind me, watching everything. Quietly, without a word, she pulled out her phone and hit record. I saw it from the corner of my eye. My other friend Mina stepped forward too, leaving the shade of the porch and walking onto the pavement so there was no doubt she was filming. She raised her phone, steady and slow, showing it openly. I turned back to the man and repeated what he'd said, loud enough for the camera to pick up. "You said trade inspection would fine me if I didn't sell you the flip-flops for $1? I kept my voice steady, almost robotic. He paused. I saw it. His eyes flicked toward the cameras, then back to me. His confidence broke, just a crack, but enough. He stepped back slightly, looked at the woman, then back again. The woman hissed something under her breath, but before she could say anything else, he grabbed her by the elbow. Not rough, but firm. He started pulling her toward the sidewalk. That's when Sarah spoke up. Not yelling, just clear and loud. "We're live, by the way. Social media loves heroes like you." She didn't smile, just stared. They froze for a moment. I don't think they expected that. The man muttered something I couldn't catch, then turned again, faster this time, and they both walked off. She was still cursing, but not loud anymore. I watched them head toward a silver car parked a few houses down. The man opened the driver's door and practically shoved her inside. Then he rounded the hood, got in, and gunned the engine. Tires squealed as they pulled away, leaving a burned smell hanging in the street. When I looked down, I noticed a $20 bill fluttering on the ground near the edge of the yard. She must have dropped it. I bent down, picked up the bill, and walked it back to the table. I didn't even feel anything about it, just did it automatically. The flip-flops were still sitting there, quiet and stupid like nothing had happened. I peeled off the $8 tag and stuck on a new one. Free. Then I placed them back in the box. One of the older neighbors leaned in and said he thought he'd seen those two at another garage sale a few weeks back. Said they'd made a scene there too. But no one had proof. No license plate. No names. Just two aggressive faces passing through, looking for soft targets. That evening I filed a police report. I gave them the video clips. The officer who came by later was nice about it. He said these types move from yard to yard, flea market to flea market, bluffing and threatening until someone gives in. He told me I did the right thing, said the footage might help if anyone else comes forward. Since then, I don't work the table alone. Even at a harmless garage sale, someone's always there with me. I keep my phone in record mode anytime it feels off. It's strange, but those flip-flops are still in a box in my new place. I never gave them away. They remind me not to argue with someone when I'm alone and don't have witnesses. Sometimes the only real protection is the right video at the right second. And a cheap item, something as minor as discount sandals, can draw out something way uglier than a lowball offer. It doesn't attract bargains, it attracts predators. It happened 2 years ago, on the hottest day of May. Rachel and I had been planning a small ceremony by the coast. We didn't have much money, so she suggested doing a yard sale. Our living room had been cluttered for weeks with old baby clothes and toys our son had outgrown. Boxes were stacked along the wall, tiny onesies, plastic dinosaurs, picture books with torn corners. That morning, I pulled out the folding tables from the shed while she sorted everything by size and type, setting them up in neat piles. By 9, the neighbors were already dropping by. Some waved from the sidewalk, others came over, picking up the shoes, turning over the toys, smiling at memories. "My daughter had these exact same booties," one woman said, holding a pair of pink ones in her palm like they were made of glass. It was warm, no clouds, and the kind of breeze that made everything feel slow and easy. Rachel kept her hair tied up with a pen, tapping prices onto tags, chatting with everyone like she'd known them forever. We had a small speaker playing from the porch, some old country mix she liked. I kept glancing at the cash box we'd left on the corner of the table. It started with just a few small bills, but by lunch, it was filling up quick. Mostly fives and singles, but they were adding up. Rachel gave me a look every time someone dropped more in. We both knew this was going to help. The ceremony, the license, maybe even a couple nights up at Lake Murray if we were lucky. Around noon, the sun got sharp. I went inside, grabbed 2 bottles of water, handed one to her. She wiped her forehead, kissed me on the cheek, then turned back to folding a stack of little jackets. "Can you check if we have another hook for the sign?" she asked. "I want to hang the 03-month stuff properly." I nodded and walked into the garage. The door was halfway open to let some air in, and light stretched across the floor, catching the dust in slow beams. I rummaged through the shelf by the back wall where we kept tools and extra cords. That's when I heard it. An engine, low and smooth, like someone was just idling. I looked up through the garage window, the one facing the street. A white pickup had stopped right in front of our lawn. It wasn't one I recognized. Clean, not new, but polished enough to reflect the sunlight. The passenger door cracked open slowly, but no one got out. Rachel didn't notice. She was crouched down, restacking a pile of little jeans that had toppled over. I could see her head moving, one hand brushing the clothes back into place. The truck didn't move. The passenger window started to roll down. Halfway, not fast. I assumed they were going to ask for directions, or maybe ask if we had any infant-sized shoes. Nothing about it seemed odd at that second, just a car pulling up and waiting for something. Then came the sound. A dry pop. Not loud, not echoing, but sharp, like someone had snapped a thick stick or cracked a wooden board on the sidewalk. Rachel jerked like she'd touched something hot, her hand flying to her stomach. For a second, she just froze like that, knees slightly bent, fingers pressed just above her waistband. Then she dropped. Not a stumble, not a fall forward, just straight down, crumpling at the knees, like her legs had gone hollow. Her shoulder hit the corner of the table and tipped it sideways. Plastic toys scattered everywhere, bouncing down the driveway. I dropped the hook in my hand. It clanged against the concrete. I was already moving before it stopped rolling. I ran out of the garage yelling her name. The pickup was already pulling away, slowly gaining speed like shooting someone in broad daylight wasn't out of the ordinary. I ran after it, yelling, but it didn't swerve or rush, just rolled off as if it had finished a routine errand. I couldn't see faces. Just the back of the truck, the license plate flipped up, dusty and unreadable. I didn't even catch the state. Rachel was on her side now, curled slightly. Blood was soaking through her t-shirt faster than I could think. She looked up at me, her lips barely moving, and said the bag with the cash was gone. I pressed both hands to her stomach. I could feel the warmth, then the wetness. I didn't notice I was crying until my throat started to close. Our neighbor Marie must have seen the whole thing. She came running barefoot across the street, already on the phone with 911. I didn't hear what she said, just caught words like shot and bleeding and front yard. I kept pressure on Rachel's wound, trying not to look directly at it. My palms were red. The sirens came quicker than I expected, but every second was stretched tight. The paramedics moved fast, rolling her onto a stretcher. One of them told me to ride in the back. I didn't argue. I climbed in, still holding her hand. She was staring up at the ceiling of the ambulance, unfocused, blinking too slow. Her fingers twitched against mine. I squeezed them gently. She whispered something about the dress, said it could still be altered. I nodded, even though I couldn't speak. At the last traffic light before the hospital, her grip loosened. I looked down. Her skin had gone pale and cold. At the ER, they pulled her away fast. A nurse told me to wait. The waiting room smelled like bleach and microwaved soup. After a few minutes that felt like hours, a doctor came out. He was young, maybe late 30s, clean-shaven, and looked tired in a way that meant this wasn't new for him. He led me into the hallway where there were no other people, just vending machines and a TV playing muted news. The floor had scuff marks from a stretcher being dragged too fast. He didn't waste words. "She didn't make it," he said. "The bullet hit a hepatic artery. There's almost no survival rate without surgery in the first 3 minutes." I didn't say anything. He looked at me like he expected a response, but I just nodded once. Behind him, a janitor was mopping near the elevators. I stared at the wet floor sign until he walked away. Detectives came that night. 2 plainclothes, both men, both polite but tired. They asked questions. Did we know anyone who would want to hurt us? Had we noticed the truck before? Did she keep the money visible? I told them everything. Marie confirmed what she saw. They canvassed the street, talked to neighbors. 2 houses had cameras, both pointed toward the road. The footage they got was shaky, distant. One clip showed a white pickup turning the corner. The other caught a flash, a muzzle flare, and the moment Rachel fell. But the angle was too wide to catch anything more. No license plate, no face. We printed flyers, promised a reward, posted online in nearby counties, even mailed copies to pawn shops in case the stolen toys popped up. People called in tips, but they went nowhere. A guy in Tulsa said he saw the truck. A woman in Ardmore claimed to have heard someone brag at a bar. Nothing stuck. Every lead ended in silence. The realtor called me a week later, saying she'd have to put the house sale on hold. I told her not to. I told her I didn't want to walk past the lawn again, or see the dark stain that had soaked into the cracks in our driveway. I moved out the next day. The cash box was still in evidence. I tried sleeping at my sister's for a while, but the sound, that single flat crack, kept waking me up. I'd hear it when the air conditioner kicked on, or when a car passed too slow outside. I'd close my eyes and see the table falling over, the little shoes scattered, her hand pressed to her stomach like she was holding something in. The detective called once more a month later. Said they were still looking. Said this kind of robbery at a yard sale was rare, but not unheard of. Said their best chance was the first 48 hours, and those were long gone now. I thanked him. He sounded like he didn't believe his own words. Days slipped into weeks, then months. The flyer with the truck photo stayed taped to the gas station door until the sun faded the ink and someone tore it down. Now I live in a trailer near Lake Murray, the place we wanted to honeymoon. I drive past the cabin we booked once, just to see the porch we never sat on. Inside my trailer, there's a small table. On it, a printout of that video still, the one showing just the blur of headlights and a cloud of dust. That's all it captured. No license plate, no face, just motion, gone before the shot even echoed. Every year on the anniversary, I update the reward post. Not because I think someone will call, but because forgetting feels worse than waiting. People say time heals, but it doesn't. It just layers over the pain until you carry it like a bruise under your ribs. Nobody should die over a few hundred in cash. If you're having a sale, don't sit with your back to the road. Keep the money inside. That bullet you never see can turn your wedding colors black. And the quiet in the dash cam footage is louder than the gunshot when you're the one who has to live with it every night. When I turned 32, I decided it was time to get rid of everything that reminded me of college. Sweaty joysticks, dusty cartridges, a console with a scratched-up logo. Gone. I dumped it all onto a folding table in the driveway for a yard sale. I set the price for the console way too high, $150. I knew nobody would pay that much, but part of me didn't want it to sell anyway. It was more about letting it go than making money. The day was warm, the kind where the sun just sticks to your skin. Neighbors were digging through old books, clothes, chipped dishes. Kids screamed near a pile of plastic swords someone had brought. It was noisy, casual. Everyone talking over each other, laughing, asking for change. She came out of nowhere. A woman in a wide-brimmed black hat, long sleeves even in the heat. She didn't say anything at first, just appeared at the edge of the table. I didn't even see her walk up. She reached out and picked up the console like it was something dirty, just 2 fingers under the edge. Her nails were long and painted a matte, sickly white. She looked straight at the price tag and laughed, loud, sharp. Heads turned. I shrugged, didn't say much. I told her, "It's a collector's item." She leaned in just slightly and hissed, like it wasn't meant for me, but I heard it anyway. "Nobody wants this junk." Her voice was dry and thin, almost like she was coughing between the words. Then she turned and walked away without looking back. Her perfume lingered, cheap and sour. It stuck to the air even after she was halfway down the street. That was it. I didn't think much of it at the time. People say weird things at yard sales. They try to haggle, or they act like experts. You learn to tune it out. A few people looked at the console after that, but nobody bought it. I started folding up chairs around 6 when the heat broke and the shadows stretched longer. The neighborhood thinned out. One couple asked about a lamp and left without buying anything. A kid dropped a toy and cried until his mom dragged him off. I stayed quiet, picked up empty soda cans, put lids back on boxes. By the time I was ready to pack everything up, the console was still there. I lifted it and felt how much dust had settled into the plastic grooves. It was lighter than I remembered. I moved the table back into the garage and locked the door. Gave the knob a twist to check. Everything was solid. The street was quiet now, just a couple porch lights glowing behind bushes. I counted up the money, not much, $40 maybe. I tossed the bills in a drawer and took a shower. My feet were sore. The back of my neck had a sunburn line from leaning over the table all day. While I dried off, I thought about that laugh. Just for a second. It popped into my head and I pushed it back out. Probably just someone messing around. I went to bed around 11. It must have been close to midnight when I woke up. Not to a sound, not at first. Just a feeling. Like the kind that drags you up from sleep when something's not right. Then I heard it. A sharp metal scrape. Not from the front, but near the kitchen. There's a small side door there that leads to the garden. I don't use it often. The lock sticks. I sat up, heart already pounding. I waited, thinking maybe it was an animal, maybe the wind. But then I heard a voice, low and hoarse, right outside the door. "Give it up easy. Nobody wants it." The exact words she'd said earlier, only now they were half whispered, half growled. Like she was right up against the door frame. I didn't say anything. I got out of bed, stepped careful, and grabbed the baseball bat from the closet. My hands were shaking, but I didn't notice it until later. I went through the hallway without turning on the lights. When I reached the back door, I hit the switch for the backyard floodlight. The bulbs hummed and snapped on. The light slammed into the figure crouched at the lock. The same black hat caught the beam and gleamed with its shiny trim. I saw her clearly now. The woman from earlier. Her hand froze mid-motion. A long screwdriver gripped tight. She hadn't expected the floodlight. She staggered back, shielding her face, and hissed something I couldn't make out. My mouth was dry, but I managed to yell out, "I hit the neighborhood alarm!" I hadn't. All I'd done was unlatch the chain on the door, but just then a dog barked far off down the block. That bark saved me. She jolted like someone had cracked a whip behind her and spun toward the street. I caught sight of a dark sedan parked under the elm tree across the road. She sprinted, hunched, like she'd done this before. I saw the license plate just long enough to catch the numbers. I whispered them to myself, then again, louder, over and over, afraid my brain would erase them out of panic. The engine started with a scream, and the car peeled off, tires chirping as it disappeared around the corner. I stayed frozen in the hallway for a while, hands still tight on the bat, floodlight buzzing faint above the backyard. When I could finally breathe, I walked backward into the kitchen and locked every bolt and chain again, triple-checking each one. 15 minutes later, the police arrived. I was already sitting on the front steps, trying to calm the tremor in my arms. A young officer got out, asked the usual questions. He complimented the floodlight and asked if I had any cameras. I pointed to the one near the roof, but it faced the driveway, not the side door. He nodded like he'd seen that before. I gave him the plate number I'd memorized, but he came back 10 minutes later shaking his head. Fake plate. The frame was plastic, probably swapped after the car was parked. The neighbors trickled out in robes and sweatpants. A few had heard the commotion, some hadn't. One couple remembered hearing a woman's laugh, sharp, ringing. Another said they saw a dark sedan, didn't catch much else. I showed them the console, told them the story from that morning. We stood in a circle, staring at it like it was supposed to tell us something. No one could figure out why someone would break into a house over that. It didn't make sense. Next morning, I took down the listing. I put the console in the hallway closet, wrapped it in a towel and shoved it behind a stack of boxes. For a while, I left the closet light on. That night, I woke up again to a sound, but this time it was just raccoons tipping over the trash bins. Still, I jumped. I lay in bed, holding still, staring at the front door. The porch light blinked once before it came back on. Just a glitch. But I saw that hat again in my head, catching the light like a warning. A week passed. I didn't sleep much. Then I got an email from the neighborhood committee. They wanted me to speak at the next meeting. Just a short talk about safety. I agreed. When I stood there, in front of folding chairs and lukewarm coffee, I realized something simple and awful. People like her don't look for houses. They look for moments. Gaps. Someone distracted. Someone alone. I told them what happened. I didn't dress it up. Just facts. The lock, the floodlight, the screwdriver. Now I've got 2 cameras. One at the front, one above the side door. Every entrance has a sensor. There's a motion light wired to the porch now. Goes off if a squirrel sneezes. It's not much, but it's something. The console's still with me. I wiped it clean. Sat it up on a shelf in my office. Not hidden, not for sale. Just there. Not because it's valuable. Not because I want to play it. But because some prices aren't written in ink. Some are written in fear. In what could have happened if one thing went differently. I keep it to remember that. I don't know if I'll ever see that woman again. Maybe it was random. Maybe it wasn't. But if that circle ever closes, if she ever comes back, I won't be fumbling for a bat in the dark. Because out there, on those quiet streets, nobody's trading for dollars. They're trading for peace of mind. And I'm not giving that up again. In spring of 2019, I was living the most uneventful kind of life. I delivered mail 6 days a week, mostly bills, ads, and the occasional catalog. Nothing exciting. I had my route, my headphones, and a thermos of instant coffee that stayed lukewarm all morning. The people on my street were quiet, mostly older couples or young families trying to act like they had it all figured out. Saturdays were for yard sales. I'd walk around, picking through used books or mismatched mugs, making small talk with folks who remembered when this neighborhood used to be safer, cleaner, better. One Saturday, I stopped by the King's driveway. Mrs. King had a whole table of glassware laid out and was chatting with a neighbor. When she saw me, she waved me over and said, almost too casually, "Did you hear about Lucy Larson? Someone robbed her at the diner after closing, took the whole day's cash." I didn't say much, just nodded and said, "That's rough." It sounded like a one-off thing. Maybe someone passing through, maybe even a stupid teenager. I didn't ask for details. I figured if it was serious, someone would have said something before now. But then the next weekend, same setup, more lawn chairs, lemonade stands, kids playing tag, and the air felt a little heavier. That's when I heard about the Travises getting hit. Same deal. They run a small antique shop near the edge of town. This time the guy waited until they were locking up, said he had a question about a vintage lamp, pulled a gun instead, cleaned out the till and ran. This time there was a detail. Short guy, gray baseball cap, maybe mid-30s, calm voice. Didn't yell, didn't shoot. Just pointed the gun and said, "Open the register." Some of the neighbors started whispering more after that. Someone said they'd seen a man in a cap walking down Lincoln Avenue around dusk. Someone else thought they heard a car idling too long behind the laundromat. I tried not to get pulled into the gossip, but it stuck in my head anyway. Still, I kept my head down. I told myself the cops were working on it. Told myself I wasn't part of that world. Honestly, I was scared. Not so much for myself, but for what it might mean if the danger was that close, and I couldn't do anything about it. Then came the third time. It was a Tuesday afternoon, not long before sunset. I had a delivery to drop off 2 streets over from mine. Small parcel, nothing special. I remember the house, blue siding, overgrown lawn, empty bird feeder swaying in the wind. I rang the bell and the woman inside, maybe late 50s, came out wiping her hands on a dish towel. She thanked me, then hesitated. "Do you know anything about renovations?" she asked, almost shy. "Not really," I said. She nodded toward the porch. "I just want a second opinion. This guy came by earlier, said he draws up plans for small additions. He walked me through the kitchen and pointed out where a breakfast nook could go. Said he'd come back tonight with samples." I remember thinking that sounded odd. People don't usually walk through homes like that on first meetings. But I didn't want to be rude. I told her to maybe ask a neighbor to be around, just in case. She laughed it off. I turned to go. 10 minutes later, halfway down the block, I heard a window shatter. I froze. It was a sharp, clean sound like someone dropped a heavy plate. I looked back and saw movement, just a quick blur past the kitchen window. I stood there, holding my mailbag like an idiot. I didn't move. My feet were stuck. Then I saw the shadow. Short guy, moving fast, shoulders low. He went in through the back. I still didn't move. A minute later, the alarm started. Loud, piercing, echoing off the brick walls of the cul-de-sac. House lights flipped on. Dogs started barking. Someone yelled from across the street. I turned and finally started walking, fast. Not running, just fast. Cops showed up in less than 5 minutes. I didn't even call them. Somebody else did. When they asked what I saw, all I said was, He was short. That's all I could say. He was short. Couldn't remember the face. Couldn't remember the color of his clothes except the cap. Just that damn cap. Gray. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because of what I saw, but because of what I didn't do. I just stood there. After that, the neighborhood changed. People stopped acting casual. No more long walks with dogs after sunset. No more evening barbecues. Porch lights stayed on. Cars locked early. Folks bought those little doorbell cameras, even if they barely knew how to set them up. Then came the fourth hit. A house just a few blocks from mine, near the elementary school. The guy came through the garage this time, took cash, jewelry, and left the door swinging in the wind. No one was hurt, but that didn't make it feel better. That's when a group of us decided enough was enough. Some neighbors chipped in to buy motion lights. Others got those fake security signs to stick in their lawns. A couple of us, me included, said we'd do more. We met in Gerald Palmer's garage and laid out a simple plan. Patrol at night in pairs. Walkie-talkies, flashlights, coffee and thermoses. We didn't play heroes. We just watched. First night out was cold. April wind hadn't calmed down yet. I was paired with a guy named Rick. He worked at the hardware store and barely talked. We took turns walking and sitting in a beat-up lawn chair near the intersection. Every sound made us twitch. Rustling leaves, a cat jumping onto a fence, wind creaking a gate. Every time we looked around, expecting that short figure in the cap. By the seventh incident, we had 3 blurry photos and half a license plate number. It wasn't much, but it was more than nothing. Some folks blew them up on their laptops, comparing pixels like detectives. It almost became a neighborhood routine. Saturdays used to be for mowing lawns or grilling hot dogs. Now we spent them figuring out how to park our cars across driveways to block a possible escape route. People measured timing, walked routes, planned for angles. It wasn't a game anymore. I stopped sleeping right. My wife noticed first. She said I looked like a stranger in our own house, like I wasn't coming home even when I was sitting at the table. She was right. I couldn't shut it off. My head just ran loops of what-ifs. If I'd spoken up earlier, if I hadn't stood frozen, maybe someone wouldn't have been hit. Maybe that third robbery would have been the last. Lindsay Smith was hosting a garage sale that Sunday. She lived at the corner, had a wide front yard, and a husband who worked night shifts, so she was often home alone in the evenings. We figured if the guy showed up again, he'd pick somewhere familiar, somewhere where the routine wouldn't surprise him. So we set positions before dusk. Quiet check-ins on the radios. Nobody talked unless they had to. It was a warm night. Too quiet. Around 10, I saw him. Same posture, same silhouette. Short, hunched shoulders, gray cap. He moved like someone who didn't want to be noticed but wasn't in a rush either. Like he'd done this before and expected it to go smooth. He glanced at the windows, quick but focused. Then he stepped onto the porch. From where I was, across the street behind a trimmed hedge, I saw him reach into his coat and pull the gun out. He tapped on the door and, when no one answered, tried to yank the chain lock. I pressed the radio. It's him, moving to the front. Cap. Gun drawn. Go. 2 of our cars blocked the street. Headlights came on, high beams flooding the yard. Doors opened fast, and 2 guys stepped out, yelling warnings, trying not to get too close. We weren't trying to be cowboys. We just needed to stop him from getting away. The guy bolted toward the backyard, but we had someone there too. Flashlights lit him up. He froze. For a second, it looked like he might charge, like he might try something desperate. Instead, he raised the gun, not pointing it, just holding it, confused maybe, or panicked. That's when I yelled. First time I raised my voice during all of this. Drop it! This is over! My voice cracked. My hands shook, but my feet held. I stood still and didn't break. I kept my eyes on him. For a long second, nothing happened. Then someone hit a button and a car alarm went off. That high-pitched siren bounced between the houses. It was like the sound pulled him out of it. He looked around, one last scan, and then threw the gun sideways into the grass. Slowly, he dropped to the ground, face down, arms spread. Patrol car rolled in maybe 2 minutes later. Lights flashing, engine humming. The officer didn't waste time. They cuffed him fast, read the rights, checked the gun. We stood there in a circle, watching like it was a movie we weren't sure we believed we were in. When they pulled him up and turned him around, we saw his face. Just a regular guy. Tired, stubbly, eyes like he hadn't slept in days. No crazy eyes, no wild grin. Just some man who looked smaller than he'd seemed in the shadows. Later they told us his name was Derek Hoffman. Already had a record, small thefts, a couple break-ins. Nothing violent before this. Guess he escalated when he got good at not getting caught. The news came the next day. Local heroes stop crime spree. Pictures of the street, the patrol cars, some of us standing around still holding radios. They made it sound like we were some kind of militia, like we had badges and training. But none of us felt like heroes. The next week was quieter. Mail delivery went back to normal. No more planning meetings, no more silent stakeouts. But something had changed. The silence felt different. Like after a storm when everything's still dripping and you don't know what's ruined until later. The police chief shook my hand at a town meeting and said our group did more than they could have in that time. But I kept thinking about the women who had to change their locks, the shop owners still waiting on insurance calls. What does a pat on the back give them? My wife sat me down one night. She looked at me like she was talking to someone halfway across a canyon. "I want my husband back," she said. "Not this shadow." That hit deeper than anything the newspapers wrote. I realized I hadn't just joined the hunt. I'd let it replace everything else. The fear, the guilt, the obsession with doing something right after doing nothing. It hollowed me out. I couldn't even remember the last evening we'd spent together just sitting, just being normal. Now when I walk past garage sales, I don't look at old records or bargain tools. I scan the people. My eyes go straight to hats. Every gray cap. Every man under 5'7". It's automatic. The victory didn't feel like a win. It just felt like something that had to be done. And if another shadow comes walking down our street, pulling something from his coat, I hope I see it in time. I hope I don't freeze again. I hope I act not because I'm ashamed, but because I'm ready. Last Saturday, I was hunting for vintage furniture for a loft apartment project. I hit up a few estate sales around the city, mostly older neighborhoods where people were offloading old stuff cheap. At one of them, in a quiet street just off the main road, this woman in her late 50s pointed to a heavy wooden dresser I was already eyeing. "Take the mirror too, comes with it," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "No one wants to carry that thing anyway." The mirror was huge, easily 4 feet high, with a bronze frame that looked hand-carved. Floral patterns ran along the edges, not ornate, but definitely aged in a way that fit the retro aesthetic. I checked the glass. It had no major cracks or discoloration, just a slight uneven tint in one corner, barely noticeable unless you stared. I hauled both the dresser and mirror into my car. The mirror barely fit in the trunk, and I had to wedge it diagonally with blankets around it so it wouldn't shift on the drive. Back at my place, I mounted the mirror in the living room, right across from a tall window that let in afternoon light. The idea was to open up the space and bounce some natural light around. The wall was solid, and the screws held tight. The sun hit around 2 p.m., and the whole room just lit up. The reflection was sharp, clear, almost better than the real view. I took some photos for my portfolio. Clean lines, symmetry, that kind of thing. The client was into sophisticated charm, and this mirror nailed it. I zoomed in on the photos, looking for anything out of place. One shot caught the bottom left corner of the mirror. The reflected tone looked slightly warmer there. Maybe it was the frame casting a tint? I didn't think twice about it. 3 days later, I noticed soft glints in the mirror around noon, like light shifting in small pulses. The sunlight hadn't changed, and nothing in the room was moving. I stood still, watching, thinking maybe it was just glare. But the bounces didn't match the window's angle. It looked like the shimmer was inside the glass, not on it. I figured it was a flaw in the backing. Older mirrors have worn amalgam sometimes. I even Googled a bit and saw that slight inconsistencies weren't uncommon. I let it go. The next day, I was sipping coffee on the couch when I glanced at the mirror again. Something about it seemed off. The image looked blurred for a second, like a camera lens trying to focus. It wasn't my face that went fuzzy, though. It was the area behind me, the part of the room that should have stayed static. I turned around, saw nothing. The hallway behind me was empty. When I turned back, the mirror was clear again. I put my hand on the wall next to it, wondering if maybe some heat from sunlight or wiring was warping the glass. But the drywall was normal, no hot spots. I pressed my palm to the mirror too. It was cool. No buzzing or static. I left it alone. In the group chat, I sent a short clip of the shimmer, asking if anyone else had seen old mirrors do weird stuff. Someone joked, "You need sleep, not antiques," and another sent a meme about cursed objects. I didn't reply. That night, around 2 a.m., I walked to the kitchen to grab water. The apartment was dark except for some city lights spilling in. As I passed the living room, I saw a dim red flicker near the bottom of the mirror. I stopped. It wasn't bright, just a soft pulse, like a tiny LED hidden inside the frame. I crouched to check if maybe the bronze trim had some old light feature built in, like a backlight, but there was no switch or wires. The glow faded by the time I got close. I touched the lower rim of the frame. It felt warmer than the rest. Not hot, just slightly above room temperature. I stood there for a few seconds, waiting for it to happen again, but nothing did. The room was silent. I turned off the hallway light and went to bed. My sleep was broken. I turned a lot, waking up in short bursts. At one point I shot up, certain someone was standing next to me. But the room was empty, door still closed. I got up, checked the lock. Still dead bolted. No sounds outside. I walked to the living room, not sure what I was looking for. Everything looked normal. I stepped close to the mirror again. It was dark in the room, but light from a passing car outside illuminated the glass for a second. I leaned in and touched the center. It was warm again, this time distinctly so, like a small motor running just behind the surface. I called Nate, a guy I've worked with before. Solid electrician, no nonsense. Told him I needed someone I trust to check the wall, wiring, whatever could be behind the mirror. He came over that evening, toolbox in one hand, infrared thermometer in the other. Still had his work gloves on from another job. I pointed at the mirror and said, "Something's not right. Just need to rule things out." We took the mirror down carefully. As we tilted it, we both heard it, faint metallic clinking, like something small shifting inside. Nate raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything. He laid it face down on a towel on the floor and started unscrewing the back panel. Dust puffed out, the old kind that smells stale. But behind it, the scent changed. Sharper, synthetic, fresh plastic, not decades old. There was a small cavity hollowed out behind the backing. Tucked in was a miniature Wi-Fi transmitter, a spherical pinhole camera, and a power module neatly wired into what I had assumed was part of the mounting loop. It wasn't. That loop was a disguised cord. Nate just let out a long, low whistle. "This is pro work," he said, not touching anything yet. Someone knew exactly what they were doing. The red LED was still blinking, steady, warm. The exact glow I'd seen that night. It didn't pulse randomly. It was the camera's status light. We both stood still for a second, not really talking. I don't think either of us liked what we were thinking. That this thing had been recording. That someone might have been watching. My first instinct was to crush it. I grabbed pliers and went for the transmitter. Nate held up a hand. "Wait, we bring this to the cops. Let them deal with it right." He was calm but firm. Destroying it now helps no one. So we packed everything into a shoebox. Nate even wrapped the components in cloth to avoid smudging the circuits. We drove straight to the station. Officer at the desk listened without cutting us off. Took the box, logged it into evidence right there. He said he'd seen a few like this before. Mirrors rigged up and planted in rentals, dressing rooms, even shared Airbnbs. Most people never noticed. He pulled up a form, scribbled something, then said they were running the serial off the router module to see what network it was linked to. I asked him if the previous owner could have known. He shrugged. "Sometimes the seller's just as much a victim," he said. "People buy and resell furniture all the time. You never really know where it's been." We went back to my place. The mirror frame without the glass was still lying on the floor where we left it. Bare, fragile looking, like a skeleton. It didn't feel like an object anymore. Just evidence of something that had passed through here. I couldn't sit in that room. I moved into the guest room for the night, where the walls were bare and nothing could reflect. Closed the curtains, locked the door. First time in years I slept without a screen or mirror near me. A week later, I got a call from a detective. Calm voice, asked if I had time to talk. I said yes. They'd examined the components. Turns out the electronics were new, much newer than the mirror. The setup had been installed recently, maybe a month or two ago. That means someone accessed the mirror after it left wherever it was before you bought it, he said. We're looking into the possibility that a former tenant used it to monitor the apartment. Apparently, it's not uncommon. Someone rents a place, rigs up surveillance, then moves out. The equipment stays hidden. Whoever comes next doesn't suspect a thing. He said the investigation was ongoing. I told him if they found whoever did it, I wanted to know. He promised to keep me updated. After that, I bought a plain mirror. No frame, just flat glass. Nothing heavy, nothing vintage. I mounted it with clips. There's no depth behind it, no place to hide anything, just a surface. But now I catch myself doing things I never used to. I cover my laptop camera with tape. I disable smart mics on devices. I knock on hollow furniture before bringing it inside. Tap under drawers, check seams, scan the back panels. Every time I find something secondhand, I pause. I listen for rattles. For the sound of something that shouldn't be there. A battery. A wire. A circuit board taped inside. People talk about how mirrors reflect what's in front of them. But I've learned that sometimes they reflect what's behind you too. More than just the room. They reflect whoever is watching. Not just your face, but your patterns, your routines, your home. Even when the light goes out and the screen fades to black, it doesn't mean no one's there. Sometimes, the glass is just the first layer. And behind it, Something's still waiting. Hidden. Powered. Watching for the next estate sale, the next buyer, the next living room wall. That Saturday, just after sunrise, I carried out a few cardboard boxes filled with handmade crafts and set them up neatly on the front lawn. I stuck a small laminated sign in the ground. All proceeds for autistic children. The grass was still damp, and the sky was that soft, early blue before the sun fully wakes. My husband was already setting up the grill, stacking hot dogs in foil trays, and the smell of smoke slowly began curling upward in the light breeze. A couple of folding tables lined our driveway, and neighbors started arriving with things to donate. Ceramic mugs, stacks of old books, some soft toys. Kids darted between the tables, giggling, picking up stuffed animals and putting them back down. I recognized almost every face. Our street was tight-knit, mostly families who'd lived here 10 years or more. Mrs. Kinley brought over a box of vintage jewelry. Joe from 2 houses down handed me a whole stack of sci-fi paperbacks. The air had that quiet, cheerful hum of a small community doing something good. I sold a couple of knitted beanies for $2 a piece and let one little girl pet a 50-cent bunny toy. Just for fun, I told her, and she grinned. Across the street, Mel's house sat behind a low fence. His Central Asian shepherd, Titan, was in the large kennel by the garage. That dog was massive, easily over 150 pounds, with thick white and gray fur and a blocky head that always looked too calm to trust. I never had a problem with him personally, but something about the size of him kept me on edge. He usually sat still, tied to a heavy chain, just watching the street. Mel said he was a softie, but I wasn't sure. Every now and then, Titan let out a deep bark that echoed off the siding. By around 10 a.m., the tables were almost full. People kept arriving. My husband passed out mustard packets and flipped hot dogs with one hand. David, a tall college kid who volunteered at the community center, helped carry more boxes from the garage. I handed out crocheted coasters to a pair of older ladies. The kids ran circles around the trees, tossing a football, occasionally running back for lemonade. It felt like the kind of day you'd remember for its simplicity. Everyone outside, doing something kind. Titan barked once, then settled again. I glanced at him briefly. He was lying down, chains stretched across the shaded corner of the kennel. Mel wasn't outside, but that wasn't unusual. Sometimes he just left the dog out and kept to himself. Nothing seemed off. A few parents asked about the autism foundation we were supporting, and I showed them a small laminated flyer with info. We kept selling. Some needlework pillows, a couple of picture frames, one old waffle maker. By 11:30, we'd raised close to $200. At noon, just as I was handing a scarf to a woman with a stroller, a sharp, tearing noise split through the air. It sounded like metal being pulled apart. Everyone froze. I turned my head, and my eyes locked on Titan. His fur was fluffed out, eyes wide, and he was charging. Not running. Charging. A short piece of chain bounced behind him, clinking and sparking on the pavement. The post had snapped clean. Gasps swept the crowd, but the children were the first to react. They screamed and bolted towards their parents. I stepped back from my table. Titan didn't bark. He didn't growl. He just moved. Fast. Low to the ground. He barreled straight into the table nearest the crafts, sending boxes of thread and fabric flying. A tower of yarn spilled across the sidewalk. The dog's saliva sprayed as his head snapped side to side. Plush rabbits and tiny bears exploded into the air like a snowfall of cotton and fur. A little boy tripped on a garden hose and started to cry. I saw David, who had been handing out bracelets, step in front of a girl in a yellow dress. He moved quick, placing himself between her and the dog. Titan didn't pause. He leapt at David, paws thudding into his chest. David reached out for the collar with both hands, but Titan jerked violently, twisted sideways, and clamped his jaws down on David's thigh. The sound was sharp. A pop, then the scream. David's body jolted from the impact. He fell hard, his knee twisting under him as Titan held on, pulling and shaking. The scream shattered whatever calm had been left. I grabbed the long-handled mop leaning against the wall of the garage. It was flimsy, meant for tile floors, not a rampaging dog, but it was all I had. I ran towards Titan, waving it, trying to get his attention off David. My husband sprinted to the side faucet and yanked the garden hose. He turned the nozzle and aimed straight at the dog's face. The water hit hard. Titan growled, shook his head violently, and finally let go. David rolled away, clutching his thigh. Blood soaked through his shorts in seconds. Titan turned his head toward me. I froze for half a beat. The mop shook in my hands. He stared, ears pinned back, body coiled tight. I backed up slowly, keeping the stick between us. Behind me, the girls who'd been helping with the tables moved fast. 3 of them formed a line, arms out, shielding the younger kids and guiding them toward the porch. Then Mel came flying out of his house, barefoot, yelling Titan's name. He had a second leash in one hand and nothing on his feet. "Titan, down!" he shouted over and over. The dog hesitated. His front paws twitched. He looked from me to Mel, then back to me. His chest rose and fell, rapid, muscles twitching under his fur. I kept the mop between us and stepped sideways. It felt like I was trying to fight off a truck with a curtain rod. Mel got closer. His voice went deeper, firmer. Titan's legs trembled like he was stuck between instinct and command. Then, just as Mel lunged forward, the dog crouched. My whole body tensed, but Mel snapped the clip onto the collar. Titan jerked once, then stopped. His entire body stiffened, but he didn't resist. Mel dragged him back slowly. It had been maybe 60 seconds total, but it felt like an hour had passed. David lay on the sidewalk, groaning through gritted teeth. The towel I'd used for cleaning up paint spills was pressed against his leg, but blood was already soaking through. His face was pale, clenched. My husband dropped to his knees, held the towel tighter. I fumbled for my phone and called emergency services. "There's been a dog attack," I said. "1 injured. Adult male. Heavy bleeding. No other victims yet." My voice was flat. The dispatcher asked if the dog was secured. I looked across the street. Mel had Titan back inside the kennel, chain double-wrapped and locked with a padlock. "Yeah, he's contained." While we waited, we wrapped a belt around David's upper leg to slow the bleeding. Someone brought out a kitchen towel and a bottle of water. The kids were huddled in the backyard now, out of sight, but not silent. Some of them were crying. The ambulance arrived in 6 minutes. Paramedics took over, cutting away the fabric and speaking in clipped voices. One of them said, "He's lucky. Nothing hit the artery." That didn't sound lucky at all. They loaded David onto a stretcher and took him to County General. He needed 30 stitches, maybe more. 2 weeks in the hospital, muscle damage, physical therapy, a lot of pain. But he didn't lose the leg. That was something. A police officer came that afternoon, took statements, asked how the dog got loose. Mel showed them the broken anchor bolt and bent chain. They issued him a citation and told him he had to reinforce the kennel immediately. No exceptions. David's family didn't press charges. They just asked Mel to pay the hospital bills. The city council heard about it at the next meeting and passed a new rule. Every dog over 100 pounds had to be fenced behind a 6-foot wall or double-gated enclosure. It wasn't just about Titan. Other people had dogs that size. No one argued. After that, people started calling it The Saturday with the alibi, like it was some local holiday with a warning label. We still do the yard sale every year, but now we hire a volunteer who's also a certified dog trainer. They walk around with a clipboard and make sure all animals stay leashed or behind fences. It sounds extreme, but no one complains. Not after what happened. Titan's still across the street. He lives behind a tall metal fence now, twice as high as before. It's solid and reinforced, with a security latch. Sometimes I hear him bark, deep and sharp. I don't run for the mop anymore. That kind of adrenaline gets used up, and mine ran out that day. Kids still ask about the stuffed animals. "Where's the bunnies this year?" they'll say. I just smile and tell them we're saving those for another time, for when it's safer. They don't understand, and they shouldn't have to. But I remember. 30 stitches is a hard thing to forget. 1 second changed a lot of lives. The sale is supposed to be about kindness, about helping, but kindness isn't cheap if you forget the chain, if you assume things are secure when they aren't. That's the part that sticks with me. The lesson's simple. Before you open the gate, check what holds your giants. Last November, on a cold Sunday afternoon, my husband and I ended up at a tag sale held at the old house of Captain Miller, who had passed away recently without any heirs. The place had been opened up to the public, and folding tables filled the lawn and interior rooms. Porcelain figurines, wooden model ships, dusty nutcrackers, and old Christmas decorations were set out for sale. A record player sat near the fireplace, playing some soft, scratchy music from the 50s. It made the whole thing feel less like a sale and more like walking through some strange, forgotten exhibit. I picked up a porcelain angel from one of the side tables, turning it over in my hands. It reminded me of something my grandmother used to keep on her mantle. The crowd inside the house was manageable, not too packed. The sellers were friendly, offering hot cider in styrofoam cups and talking to people about the history of each item. I told my husband I wanted to look around upstairs, mostly out of curiosity. I'd heard someone mention there were old stamp boxes in the bedroom, possibly valuable. The staircase creaked as I went up. It wasn't falling apart, but the wood gave a slow, tired groan under each step. The hallway smelled of lavender sachets, old lady perfume, the kind that lingers on fabric long after anyone's been around to wear it. At the far end of the hall, the bedroom door stood ajar. The light inside was off, but the window allowed enough overcast daylight to filter in. I stepped inside slowly. The room was neat, with a large oak wardrobe on one side, a low dresser, and a neatly made bed with a crocheted blanket. In the center of the room, beside a folding table filled with trinkets, stood an elderly woman in a gray overcoat. Her hair was thin and white, pulled back tight. She muttered softly, just under her breath, like she was reading to herself. She was holding a small notebook, flipping between pages as she moved figurines from the table into a cardboard box, one at a time. Her hands shook slightly, but the way she placed each item down felt practiced and deliberate, like she'd done this exact task many times before. I hesitated in the doorway and then asked, "Excuse me, is everything all right?" She didn't look at me at first, but then nodded slightly and said, "Just checking the inventory for the shop." Her voice was clear, but distant, like someone talking while half listening to something else. I figured she was an appraiser brought in by the estate managers, checking off a list of what was valuable. She didn't seem confused, just focused. I didn't want to interrupt more than I already had, so I nodded back, stepped out of the room, and made my way downstairs. Back in the living room, I mentioned the woman to the girl running the cash table. I just wanted to check the price on the figurines upstairs, assuming the appraiser had already tagged them. When I described the woman, gray coat, short white hair, taking notes, the girl looked confused. "We're expecting an appraiser," she said, "but she's a younger woman, dark hair. Should be here later this afternoon." We both paused for a second, just kind of looking at each other. Then she said, "Can you show me where you saw her?" and called over one of the security guys who was standing near the front porch sipping cider. The guard followed me to the stairs, and we both climbed up. The hallway was just as quiet. That soft lavender scent was still in the air, but the room at the end now stood wide open. The cardboard box was gone. The woman was gone too. The guard stepped inside first and looked around. The window on the far wall was open a few inches. Cold air pushed in, bringing with it more of that faint lavender smell. We walked through every room, calling out, but there was no trace of the woman, her coat, or the box. It was like she had vanished the second I stepped downstairs. The girl at the register did a quick count of the figurines from that room. Only 3 were missing. Small plastic elves, the kind you'd find in a bargain bin at a drugstore. They were tagged at $1 each. Not even real porcelain. With Christmas just a few weeks away, maybe someone figured it was easier to decorate their mantle for free. Still, the hosts didn't want to just shrug it off. They insisted on calling the police. The officer who arrived didn't seem too concerned. He jotted down a few notes, looked around briefly, then said something about how open houses attract more than just buyers. "No damage done," he said. "We're not chasing someone over $3." I didn't argue, but the whole thing felt off. Too quiet, too smooth. I couldn't get her hands out of my head. How calm they were as she packed the box. It had all looked so normal, and that's what bothered me. Back home, I spent a couple hours checking neighborhood forums and security feeds. I reached out to the owners of a few homes nearby that had visible cameras facing the street. Most either didn't respond or said their systems overwrote footage after 48 hours. The few that checked found nothing. Either the angle was wrong or the files were already gone. In the end, we were the only people who saw her, and even to us, she'd looked like she belonged there. A week later, I saw a post on a local forum titled "Odd Situation at Tag Sale, Advice." It described a woman at another estate sale, this one in a different neighborhood, who had taken some Christmas ornaments from a table near the exit. Again, elderly, gray coat, notebook, murmuring softly. But this time, the seller found a folded $50 bill under a candle holder, along with a small note. "Thank you." No name, no explanation. It left them more confused than angry. I replied to the thread, described what we'd seen, asked if anyone had better camera angles or recognized her. No one responded. The post disappeared within a few days, maybe deleted, maybe just buried under other threads. When I checked with the police again, they said it might be a resident from a local assisted living facility. Someone who wanders off during less supervised hours. A collector maybe. Or someone chasing some memory, thinking these sales were part of her past. They asked for photos. I sent them what I had from the day. Low-quality, blurry shots from the living room camera pointing toward the hallway. The silhouette was there. A round figure in a gray coat, a scarf hanging loosely. But the face was turned away or too blurry to match to anything. The value of the missing items was too low to justify further investigation. The officer on the phone didn't say it outright, but I could tell they weren't going to look any deeper unless someone reported a larger theft. Without better footage or an ID, they couldn't even put out a notice. The story thinned out from there, like frost fading off a windshield. A few more whispers on forums. A rumor at a craft market about someone matching her look walking out with a candle holder. But no names. No arrests. No clear pattern, other than her quiet presence and the odd habit of sometimes paying for what she took. Now, whenever we go to estate sales or flea markets, I find myself scanning the room more than browsing. I look for the gray coat. I check for the notebook. I watch how people move through the space. My husband teases me sometimes, says I've turned paranoid, always tracking people with my eyes like I'm security. But even he keeps his wallet closer now. It wasn't about the value of those 3 elves. It was what they took from me. I used to love going to these sales, poking through old books, finding strange things, imagining who they belonged to. I liked the sense that you were visiting someone's history, quietly paying respect by giving their things a new home. Now I can't stop thinking that anyone picking something up might just walk out with it. That anyone, if they move confidently enough, can pretend they're supposed to be there. That old woman, wherever she came from, disappeared without a trace. But what stayed behind was this dull awareness, this thought that the line between guest and thief is thinner than I'd ever realized. And I keep hearing it now, every time I step through an open door at one of these sales. The quiet whisper of the house itself. You can take anything, as long as you say it's yours. That's the real lesson. Not about loss, but about the cost of feeling safe. Because security isn't measured by what gets stolen. It's measured by how long it takes before you stop feeling like you can relax. And that, sadly, isn't for sale at any price. I study chemistry, 2nd year. Always on the lookout for cheap stuff I can use at home. Old lab glass, scrap metal, anything. A few weeks ago I passed by this yard sale a couple blocks down from my dorm. It was mostly junk, rusty tools, some broken furniture, but on a folding table under a plastic tarp, I saw something that caught my eye. It was an old metal case, scratched up with a few dents. Looked like something from a Cold War movie. Thick steel latches, faded black paint. $5. The woman running the sale was probably in her 30s. She said it used to belong to her uncle, who was a scientist or something, and had passed away last year. She didn't seem to know what was inside. Said the case had been sitting in the garage since she was a kid. I offered her $3. Told her it was covered in grime and probably empty. She laughed, called me a shark, and let it go for $5. I carried it home on the bus, got a few odd looks from people eyeing the heavy case on my lap, but I just sat there thinking I'd found some cool prop for my shelf. Back in my room, I set it on the floor and clicked open the latches. I was ready for dust, maybe a broken microscope or empty flasks. Instead, inside was a single smooth metal cylinder, about the size of a soda can, brushed silver, no labels, just sitting in black foam padding, like it had been custom fitted. Next to it, a notebook, hard cover, black tape along the spine. When I flipped it open, the pages were filled with neat handwriting, formulas, diagrams, graphs with temperature curves and strange units I didn't recognize. Pages and pages of it. No title. No name. I picked up the cylinder. It wasn't heavy, but the second I touched it, I noticed it was warm. Not hot, just off. The garage at the sale had been cold. My apartment was cold. But this thing was definitely warm to the touch, like it had its own heat. My fingers tingled, but I figured it was just nerves or the metal reacting with sweat or something. I placed it on my desk and looked at it again. It just sat there, silent. No buttons, no seams. I took a few photos, top down, side view, and one of the notebook next to it. Then I sent them to our student group chat, Chem Wizards, where a bunch of us post weird finds, questions from class, or meme stuff. Didn't think much of it. 2 minutes later, one of the older guys, Gregor, who'd graduated last year and now worked in some lab in Poland, replied. All he wrote was, "Bro, that looks like a cesium-137 source. Where's the thermometer?" I just stared at the message. Cesium-137? I'd heard the name before, but I wasn't sure what it meant. I started Googling. Pages loaded with long texts, decay rates, sieverts, radiation sickness. The numbers didn't mean much, but I saw enough references to radiation burns, cancer, and a story about some kids in Brazil who died after playing with a glowing capsule. My stomach turned. I looked back at the cylinder. Still sitting there, same brushed metal, quiet. I leaned in, trying to spot anything. I turned off my desk lamp, then the ceiling light. The room went dim. After a moment, I saw it, just barely. A faint glow, purple-blue, like a watch dial but dimmer. I backed away fast, hit the light switch. The glow vanished in the brightness, but my heart was pounding. I went to the bathroom to wash my hands, scrubbing them hard, but the memory of touching it was burned in. My fingertips still tingled. I grabbed my phone and started typing again in the group chat. "What do I do with it?" I asked. Gregor answered quick. "Don't touch it again. Wrap it in foil if you have any. Where are you storing it?" I didn't even answer. I went back to the room, grabbed some old textbooks and stacked them over the cylinder. Then I heard a thump above me. My upstairs neighbor, probably wondering what I dropped. A second later, he knocked on the floor. I didn't answer. I just stood there, frozen. I looked down at my hand. My fingers were red and itchy. A new message came into the chat. "Close it and get it away from people. Call the Department of Public Safety." I didn't even reply. I grabbed the cylinder with a dish towel, dropped it back into the case, slammed it shut, and carried the whole thing out to the balcony. The air was cold, my hands were shaking, and I kept telling myself the night wind would help somehow. Just get it out of the apartment. That's all I could think. I found the number online, local emergency hotline. I expected a long wait, but someone picked up on the second ring. Calm voice, no small talk. I told them what I had, how I got it, described the glow and the heat. The guy on the line didn't sound surprised. He asked, "Is the object metallic? Any heat coming from it?" I said yes. He told me to stay inside, keep it isolated, and wait. He didn't say how long. About an hour later, I saw the lights from my window. A van pulled up, plain white except for a yellow triangle symbol on the side. No sirens. 2 people came out wearing full protective suits, face shields, boots. They moved fast, but quiet. One held a Geiger counter. It was already crackling before they got near the building. They knocked on my door, and when I opened, they didn't step inside. The taller one held the counter out, and it started ticking louder as he pointed it toward the balcony. He told me not to move. Said all residents had been told to stay indoors. I watched through the door crack as they carried in a box lined with thick material. Lead, I think. The smaller one stepped out onto my balcony and lifted the case with metal tongs, slowly placing it into the lead box. Then they sealed it with thick tape and labeled it with red warning signs. After that, they taped plastic sheets over my balcony door and windows. One of them handed me a clipboard. "This confirms your voluntary exposure and acceptance of medical evaluation," he said. I signed. My hands were numb, not from fear, just from being locked in the same position too long. The next morning, I had to go in for testing. The clinic was part of some emergency response network, I guess. I expected chaos, but it was quiet and cold, like a private lab. A nurse in gloves and goggles drew my blood, ran a scan over my hands and chest. Then a doctor came in, told me my dose was below critical, but they were going to monitor me for a while, just to be safe. He explained the kind of device I found was used in older labs, sometimes in construction gear to measure density. Said it wasn't unusual for these things to end up lost when their owners died. He showed me a binder full of photos, similar cases, metal tubes, damaged instruments, even a melted wall from some garage in New Mexico. People kept them thinking they were junk. The niece, the woman who sold it to me, was already being questioned, he said. Turned out she never even opened the case. Just thought it was some empty relic from her uncle's hoarding days. She got off with a warning, but they told her any further mishandling would mean a serious fine. As for the cylinder, they weren't taking chances. It was sent to a federal disposal site for radioactive materials, probably buried deep in concrete somewhere now. Before I left the clinic, they gave me a thick folder of pamphlets. Titles like Radiation Safety in Civilian Settings and How to Detect Exposure Early. They also gave me a printed schedule of blood tests for the next 12 months. I walked out with the folder under one arm and my coat zipped all the way up, knees feeling slightly shaky. My head wasn't spinning, just heavy. Back in my room, there was a strange quiet, like something was missing, not just the case, but the weight it brought. The spot on the floor where it had been still had a faint imprint from where the metal had sat. I kept glancing at it without meaning to. Since then, every time I pass a flea market or a garage sale, I remember the warmth in that metal. The way it hummed in silence, how it almost didn't feel dangerous, just odd. Now I carry a small dosimeter in my backpack. Bought it online for the price of a pizza. Some classmates laugh when they see it clipped inside my bag, but I keep the batteries in all the time, even at night. Danger doesn't always come with smoke or alarms. Sometimes it just sits quietly in your hand, warming your fingers. I think that's the part that stuck with me most. What we learn in lectures, radiation, exposure, decay, it's just theory until it lands in your room at midnight. The lesson was simple. Every strange object deserves a second thought. If the answer to what if sounds anything like a radioactive isotope, leave it where you found it. In the fall of 2014, Molly called me early one Saturday morning and asked if I could help her with a yard sale. I'd known her since high school, and I never said no to her, even if it meant standing outside in the cold all day. She was in the middle of a divorce and trying to save up to move to the city after Halloween. We spent the morning dragging out old gym equipment, neon-colored workout clothes, and a box of archery arrows she hadn't touched in years. She was getting rid of anything that reminded her of the life she was trying to leave behind. Her soon-to-be ex, Harry, showed up around noon to pick up some things he said were his. He parked a little down the street and walked up without saying much. He didn't look at either of us for long, just kept his eyes on the ground or on the stuff he wanted to take. They didn't argue, which I guess was a win, but the way he moved around her, tense, distant, put me on edge. He took a camping stove, a couple of tools, and an old stereo. Didn't even say goodbye, just loaded his car and drove off. By sunset, we counted up the money together on her porch. It wasn't a huge haul, but it was something. She had this small smile, kind of like she was finally breathing again. Said she was heading straight to a friend's costume party. I offered her a ride since the air was getting colder and her Jeep had been making weird sounds for weeks, but she brushed me off. "I just want to blast some music and have a little drive to myself," she said. I didn't push it. That was the last time I saw her smile. Sometime after midnight, my phone buzzed with a message. "You already here?" I stared at it for a moment, confused. My costume was in the trunk of my husband's car, and we weren't going anywhere. I figured maybe she meant to send it to someone else. I didn't get a chance to reply. By the time I woke up the next morning, the message was still there, unanswered. A few hours later, I got a call from her cousin asking if I'd heard from Molly. Her Jeep had been found abandoned off a dirt road, about 3 miles from the highway. 2 tires were slashed with what looked like a knife. The interior was clean, almost too clean, but the lockbox we put the sale money in was gone. No phone, no purse. The keys were still in the ignition. The passenger seat was pushed back a little too far, like someone taller had been sitting there. Police started combing the nearby cornfields and fallow lots that afternoon. Volunteers showed up from the next town over, bringing their own dogs. The local search and rescue brought in a few trained units, too. The wind picked up around dusk, made it hard to hear anything, and the corn was high enough to hide a person. They kept looking anyway. Harry said he'd been home all night, sorting through child support paperwork online. His attorney backed that up, said they'd been on calls, finalizing numbers. Molly's lawyer said the same thing. No one accused anyone out loud, but nobody really believed him either. Still, without a body or blood or anything like that, there wasn't much they could do. By the 3rd day, her face was on every TV station across the state. I joined the search teams whenever I could, walking through ditches and overgrown trails, scanning the ground for anything that didn't belong. A baseball cap, a piece of cloth, even a crushed soda can felt like it might mean something. I kept thinking maybe she'd just gotten scared and run off to hide. Maybe she'd be cold and hungry, but alive. We found tire marks that led into the brush and stopped near a dry creek bed. Nearby were scattered toys, plastic dinosaurs, a Barbie head, and a box with a cracked lid. Some of it was the stuff she'd been selling that morning. The lead investigator met with us after the 5th day. Said whoever did it probably knew about the money and her plan to drive alone. It wasn't random. That much they were sure of. Harry stayed at the edge of every conversation, answering only what was asked. His alibi depended on computer logs, timesheets from some financial portal, and Wi-Fi usage. The tech guys said those logs could be faked, but proving it was another matter. By the 6th week, it was mostly locals and hunters still looking. One of them, a guy who came out every Sunday, spotted a blue jacket in a ravine. It was Molly's, still zipped, partly covered by leaves and mud. There was dried blood on the collar and a dent near the shoulder like she'd fallen or been hit hard. No body. Just the jacket and a few strands of hair tangled in the lining. After that, the searches stopped. Cold weather moved in. The case went still, like the frozen ground that covered the fields. I started visiting the station during Harry's interviews. I was the only one he'd actually talked to without a lawyer present. I tried watching his eyes for a shift, something sudden or off. He always spoke low, slow, like he was tired of being asked. "I loved her," he said once. "She left me too fast." The way he said it, flat, not angry, stuck with me. He acted more like someone who'd been abandoned than someone under suspicion. Police kept checking his records, following his card transactions, his phone's movements, even satellite images. Nothing pointed out of place. Everything about him was just quiet enough to be normal. The district attorney said a charge wouldn't hold. No weapon, no body, no witness. "Juries want certainty," she told me, "not instinct." Molly's family and I paid for a billboard. Her picture, smiling with her dog, a hotline number in red underneath. We had it placed by the highway near the last place her phone pinged. Calls started trickling in. A woman said she saw someone who looked like her outside a gas station in Colorado. Another thought she spotted her crossing the street in a border town in Mexico. Police checked them all out. Nothing stuck. Hopes flared and then faded, leaving nothing but smoke and quiet. Each time I told myself not to believe, but I always did, just a little. The list of suspects never grew. It circled the same person over and over, like the slashed tires on her Jeep. Same shape, same damage, no forward movement. It's been 10 years. I moved to another state, work in a small office near a river, but some days I still see that jacket in my mind, crumpled in a ditch, half covered by leaves. Harry got remarried last spring. The local paper mentioned it in passing, reminded everyone that the disappearance was still technically open. Just another unresolved headline next to the weather report. I keep a small box in my closet. Inside are Molly's old business cards, back when she used to run fitness classes in the park. Her name in bright green ink. I take them out sometimes, line them up on the kitchen table like they're going to point somewhere, like they'll form a path back to that night. If this story has a lesson, it's simple. Don't say, "She'll turn up," when someone vanishes. Say, "What can I do right now?" Because the first few hours are where the truth breathes. After that, everything gets tangled. People forget. Fields get plowed over. Tracks disappear. I still think about her laugh. The way she used to clap her hands once when something was really funny. I wonder if that sound's still out there somewhere. But I think it probably dissolved into the corn and the cold and the silence. The circle won't close until someone finally says what happened between those two slashed tires and that blood-stained jacket in the ravine. Until then, I keep my phone on every night, just in case it rings again like it did that last time. I fix cars for a living, mostly old ones people don't want to let go of. So yeah, I'm used to heavy tools, grease-stained hands, and long hours hunched over engines. But over the years, my garage had started looking less like a workshop and more like a storage unit. Personal junk just piled up. Broken kid bikes, mismatched speakers, tool sets that had been replaced by power tools long ago. I'd been ignoring it for years, just stepping over boxes, telling myself I'd sort it out next week. This spring, I finally decided to clear it all. I listed everything online for a weekend sale. No shipping, cash only, first come, first served. Saturday was slow. A few neighbors came by, picked up some old drills and socket sets. A teenager bought 2 speakers for $10. Didn't even ask if they worked. The day crawled. Hot sun, no breeze, and every hour felt like 2. By evening, most of the big stuff was gone. Only a couple boxes of hand tools were left, scattered across the folding table I'd set up on the driveway. People were packing up. Kara from next door rolled her cooler back inside, and the guy across the street dragged his table of fishing gear to the garage. I stayed out, sorting what was left. Half-used tape rolls, rusty clamps, dented pliers. I was deciding what to toss and what to box when I saw him. A man I hadn't noticed before stepped slowly onto the driveway. Mid-50s maybe, with a hunched back and thin frame. His jeans were stained like he'd been kneeling in dirt, and his faded baseball cap sat too low on his forehead, shadowing his face. He didn't say anything, just started flipping through the wrenches on the table, one by one, with these dry, deliberate movements. But his eyes weren't on the tools. They were fixed on me. Not in a casual, people-watching way. He was tracking me, measuring how far I was from the table, how I was moving, where I looked. I caught myself pausing when our eyes met. He didn't blink, just kept staring like he was doing math in his head. I cleared my throat and offered a quick smile, then said, "You can take a whole set for $5. I just want to get rid of it." No reply. He didn't even nod, just kept looking. Then, without warning, he reached for the sledgehammer. My sledgehammer. It wasn't even on the table with the sale items. It had been leaning against the back corner by my toolbox, clearly set aside. He slid it out and tucked the handle under his arm like he was claiming it. "That's not for sale," I said. "It's mine. I use it for work." He lifted his head slowly. I got my first real look at his face then. Pale, tight skin, sunken cheeks, and tired eyes that looked through me instead of at me. There was nothing behind them, just flat, dull gray. No recognition, no curiosity, no response. Just emptiness. Then he spoke. "How much?" he asked, voice low and steady. The way he said it, though, it wasn't a question. There was no upward lift, no uncertainty. It sounded like a warning or a test, like he was giving me one more chance to say the right thing. Before I could answer, a door slammed somewhere behind me. Probably Greg, my neighbor, calling it a day. The sharp sound reminded me that I was almost alone out here. Most of the street had gone quiet, just a few porch lights flickering on. I took a breath and said, "It's not for sale. Please leave that. I need it." He didn't move, just tightened his grip around the sledgehammer handle. His forearm flexed, veins rising under his skin like cables under strain. He held it one-handed, but like it weighed nothing. The air went dead. No dogs barking, no tires on the street, not even wind through the trees. Just this thick silence between us. A silence that wasn't accidental. It was like the street paused, listening. I took a step back. He didn't follow, but he didn't look away either. His hand stayed on the hammer, locked in place. Muscles tight, shoulders squared just enough to make it clear he was deciding something. The weight of the moment pressed in like a wall, and I knew this wasn't about a tool anymore. I realized the polite part of the conversation was over. I stepped back and reached for the van's rear doors, trying to put a barrier between us. The hinges groaned as they moved, dragging loud and slow, giving away my intention. That's when he stepped closer. Just one step, but enough to close the space. He lifted the sledgehammer halfway, not in a swing, but enough to show he could. The movement was precise, controlled. My heart was hammering so loud I could barely hear my own thoughts. Instinct took over. I grabbed the shovel leaning next to the van, an old one, cracked near the handle, the blade rusted from years of use. I hadn't fixed it since it snapped during a drainage repair last winter. Still, it was something. He smiled. Not a laugh, not friendly. More like someone seeing a joke they didn't need to explain. Like I was amusing. My grip tightened on the shovel's worn wood. He adjusted his stance, eyes locked on me. I didn't wait. I pulled the van doors hard, and they slammed shut between us, steel clanging. The sound was sharp in the silence. I backed up, looking through the narrow crack between the doors. He was right there. The handle of the sledgehammer scratched against the metal as he tried to hook it into the gap. I didn't think. I lifted the shovel over the top edge of the door and swung down hard, aiming for his arm. The cracked handle groaned, but the metal head made contact. His forearm twisted, and he let out a short, sharp cry that echoed through the quiet street. He stumbled back, clutching his arm. He swore under his breath and backed toward the curb. The hammer dropped onto the driveway with a dull thud. He turned, shaking out his arm, and walked toward the road, limping slightly. I didn't chase him. I ran for my phone. My hands shook as I dialed 911. I couldn't catch my breath, but I managed to get the words out. Assault. Weapon. Still nearby. The dispatcher stayed on the line. 10 minutes later, 2 patrol cars rolled onto the street. By then, the man was gone. The cops moved fast, asked me for a description, checked the yard, questioned the neighbors. A few had heard the shout. One said they'd seen a figure in a cap moving toward the fence line between the houses. No one got a good look. No face, no license plate. Just a shape disappearing into the block. We walked the neighborhood with flashlights, checked under porches, behind trash bins, through side yards. Nothing. No hammer, no footprints, no blood. Just a dent in the asphalt where the shovel had landed, and a dark stain nearby from my overturned coffee maker. The rest of the driveway was clean. They told me it was probably a repeat offender. Someone watching for homes with open garages, no cameras. Someone testing boundaries. They advised better lighting, cameras, locks. Keep everything inside. Don't linger outside after dark. One of the officers circled back twice that night. He said it was quiet, but told me to call if I saw anything again. First thing the next morning, I drove to the hardware store. Bought a motion sensor camera, one of those that send a live feed straight to your phone. Mounted it right above the garage, angled at the driveway. Got a floodlight too, yellow-white, the kind that snaps on if you so much as walk past the mailbox. Now, every night when I step outside, the yard lights up like a stage. My phone vibrates whenever a squirrel crosses the driveway. It's annoying, but I keep it all on. I don't leave tools outside anymore. Doesn't matter if I'm stepping away for 5 minutes or packing up a sale, I lock it all up. Even the broken shovel. The officer was right. That man didn't want a hammer. He wanted in. Into the garage, maybe the house. He picked a tool because it was convenient, not because he needed it. He was looking for an excuse to get close. Sometimes late at night, I still hear creaking outside. Could be a tree, could be the wind. But every time, I see the image in my mind again. The edge of the shovel hitting leather, his mouth opening, sound caught between breath and scream. That split second when I acted without thinking, and it made the difference. I never liked cameras, felt like a privacy invasion. But now they're the only neighbors I trust to stay up and watch the street with me. Lesson simple. If someone comes to your sale and spends more time watching you than your stuff, close up shop. And keep something solid within reach. Because when a buyer chooses you instead of the tools, the sale's already over. You just haven't shut the doors yet. It was raining hard that evening, the kind of rain that makes everything look darker than it should. I was already wet by the time I spotted the garage sale sign, half soaked and taped to a leaning mailbox. It wasn't the best weather for browsing junk, but someone on a local Facebook group said there was a box of electronics going for $5. I figured it was worth checking out. I parked across the street and jogged over, shoes splashing in shallow puddles. The driveway was quiet. Just a few folding tables under a sagging canopy. Most stuff was already covered in plastic. A middle-aged woman in a poncho stood near a folding chair, smoking. When I asked about the electronics, she didn't even look at me, just pointed with her cigarette. "It's all in that box. My husband's crap. Take it all." The box wasn't marked, just a medium-sized cardboard one, sealed up with old yellowing tape. It had a layer of dust thick enough to write in. No writing on it. I asked again to be sure, and she waved me off. "Whole box, $5. Don't bring it back." I like surprises. I like taking things apart, seeing what works, maybe salvaging something useful. I shoved the box into my trunk and drove home, rain still coming down hard. I didn't even change clothes. Just dragged the box into the kitchen, flipped on the light, and grabbed a knife to cut the tape. I expected old remotes, maybe broken radios or chargers, stuff you find in junk drawers. But right on top was a key, brass, worn down smooth, with a single letter etched into the head, an M. No keychain, no tag, just sitting there by itself. Beneath the key was a folded newspaper, brittle and chewed up on the edges, like moths or mice had gotten to it. Nothing was readable. Then there was a bundle of photos, Polaroids, about 15 or 20 of them, wrapped tight with an old rubber band that snapped when I pulled it. The first picture had writing on the white border. Maria, May 1987. The photo showed a girl in her 20s, smiling at the camera. Short dark hair, big glasses, floral dress. She was sitting on a picnic blanket with a sandwich in her hand. Nothing looked unusual until I stared at the background. Behind her, a man was standing near a tree. He wasn't facing the camera, just sort of angled, like he didn't know he was in the frame. Thick mustache, cap pulled low, hands in his jacket pockets. I flipped through the rest of the stack. Same girl, different places. In every photo, the man was there. Always in the background, sometimes blurry, sometimes clearer. One was at a farm. She was holding a basket of apples. He was by the barn, half hidden behind a post. Another was at a gas station. She was drinking a soda. He was near a car, just a shape behind the pumps. Every single photo. Same man. The last few photos didn't have writing, but there were a couple of yellowed sheets of paper stuck behind them. Looked like letters, but only one was fully readable. It ended with, "I'll come before the fair. Be ready." That's when something shifted in my stomach. I recognized the name. Maria. It wasn't common around here, and I was sure I'd heard it before. I opened my laptop and pulled up a podcast I'd been listening to the last few months. A local one. They covered cold cases in the county, missing persons, old murders, stuff that never got solved. I searched their site. Episode 12. Maria Velasquez. Vanished in 1987. Last seen leaving work at a diner outside town. No suspects. No leads. The picture from the picnic looked like the one they used in the episode. I opened it again and paused on her face. Same person. I checked the other photos again. Same hair, same smile. It was her. I started shaking a little. Not dramatic, just enough that I dropped one of the photos trying to put them back together. I stood there for a second, not sure what I was supposed to do. This stuff had been sitting in someone's garage for who knows how long. Almost 40 years, just collecting dust. I looked at the key again. Tried it in a couple of old locks I had, but it didn't fit. No markings on the shaft, nothing to tell where it came from. I laid everything out on the kitchen table. My brain kept going in circles. If I kept it, it'd haunt me. If I threw it away, that felt worse. So I put it all back in the box. Every photo, every scrap of paper, the key. I closed the lid, put it in the passenger seat, and drove across town to the police station. Not the main one, the smaller one where they handle cold cases. A guy at the desk raised his eyebrows when I said I had something related to a disappearance. I just handed him the box and told him where I got it. Detective Norton was all business. He didn't smile, didn't ask small talk questions, just took the box, opened it piece by piece, and began taking photos of everything on a large evidence table. He made me write a statement and asked for exact details: where, when, who gave me the box, what made me suspicious. I repeated everything, down to the woman's words and how the tape looked. "The key is interesting," he said, holding it under a lamp. "But unless we find the lock, it's just metal." He bagged it all carefully. The Polaroids, letters, even the brittle newspaper. I signed the transfer form, officially giving the contents to the department. He said anything from the 80s could give new angles, especially on unresolved disappearances. Then he handed me back my ID, nodded once, and walked away without another word. It was getting dark by the time I left the station. Cold fog rolled over the parking lot, swallowing the headlights of passing cars. I sat in mine for a bit before turning the key. On the drive home, I kept glancing into the rearview mirror, not sure what I expected to see. The road behind me was empty. Still, I couldn't shake the idea that someone might be following, just outside the beam of my taillights. That night, the name Maria popped up in the local news section online. Just a small mention. New evidence submitted in the case of Maria Velasquez, missing since 1987. My heart beat harder than it should have. I didn't know her, never met her, but somehow I felt tied to it now. Like I'd stepped into someone's unfinished story and couldn't step back out. The next day I went back to the house where I got the box. The woman was sweeping leaves off her porch. I asked her again who the stuff belonged to. "Not mine," she said. "Came from the guy who lived here before. Moved out a year ago. Left a bunch of junk in the garage. We've been clearing it ever since." I told her a detective might come by and thanked her for her time. She shrugged and said she didn't even remember seeing the box before. I passed her contact to Norton. He took it, said he'd follow up. But after that, nothing. No updates, no calls. Weeks passed. The rain stopped. The days got warmer, and life went back to normal. Mostly. The garage sale box faded from the front of my mind. I started thinking I'd overreacted, maybe made a bigger deal out of it than it really was. Then I found the envelope. It was early morning, and I was stepping out for work when I noticed it on the floor just inside the door. Plain white, no stamp, no address. Someone had slipped it under during the night. I opened it slowly. Inside was a single photo, a copy of one from the box. Maria on the farm, holding apples. But this version was cropped differently. The man with the mustache was clearer now. He was staring directly at the camera. On the back of the photo was a line written in blocky handwriting. "Some secrets don't want to be dusted off." I stood there frozen, envelope in one hand, photo in the other. The hallway light flickered once. I grabbed my keys and drove straight to the station. Norton wasn't there, but the officer on duty logged the envelope and said they'd check for fingerprints. I didn't stay long. Something in me just wanted to get away from that building. That night I couldn't sleep. Every noise outside seemed louder. Once I was sure I heard a click, like a camera shutter. I turned off every light and waited by the window. Nothing moved. But I didn't fall asleep until dawn. The detective called me the next afternoon. "We had the photo examined," he said. "It's not old. The paper is modern. Someone's been watching. They printed this recently." That was enough. I went to the hardware store, bought 2 new deadbolts, reinforced the back door, and installed a motion sensor alarm by the window. I didn't have enemies. I didn't poke around where I shouldn't. I just bought a box. Still, it felt like the box hadn't let go. The case is still open. Norton says they're working on leads, and that they'll keep me updated. I don't expect answers anytime soon. I keep the receipt from the garage sale in a locked safe now. $5, handwritten on a sticky note. Not much, but enough to show I didn't steal anything, didn't fabricate a thing. Just found it by accident. I think about that key sometimes, what it might unlock. A storage unit, a cabin, a drawer in some motel upstate. Something lost, or something someone wanted kept hidden. I don't want to find out anymore. Since then, I only go to sales where everything's in clear plastic bins. If I can't see what's inside, I don't touch it. No more mystery boxes. No more surprise finds. The story cost me nothing and everything. It isn't mine, but I walked right into it without knowing. That's the part that gets me. I wasn't looking for anything. But sometimes, the past doesn't care if you're looking. Now I listen to every episode of that podcast. I listen for Maria's name. I wait to hear if they ever find her. A field, a well, a shallow grave. I hope not. I hope she ran away, started over, lived. But some nights, I hear sounds outside, shuffling steps, a thud. Once, a whisper through the mail slot, and I remember that not every story should be followed to the last page. Sometimes, the last page finds you. I'm 72, and I've held on to some books longer than I've known certain friends. Over the years, they stacked up high on every wall of my house, floor to ceiling. In spring, I noticed the floorboards starting to complain, groaning under the weight. My neighbor Greg, who's always offering too many solutions, finally said, "You gotta sell some of that stuff before the house caves in." He wasn't wrong. So one clear Saturday morning, I dragged out 2 folding tables and set them up by the sidewalk in front of my house. I spent a couple hours sorting everything. Novels on one side, poetry and non-fiction on the other. I didn't price most of them. If someone asked, I made it up on the spot. I wasn't in it for money. I just wanted the books to end up somewhere they'd be read. Sun warmed the back of my neck while I arranged the hardcovers so their spines faced out, titles clean and visible. A breeze kept lifting a flap of the tarp I'd left rolled beside the porch, but otherwise the street was quiet. Buyers trickled in by mid-morning. A middle-aged woman with a canvas tote looked through the poetry. "These are in beautiful condition," she said, tracing a finger down the side of an old Auden collection. Later, a young couple stopped and picked out 3 vintage crime novels, I think more for the covers than the content. A collector type with a notepad and square glasses asked if I had any ace doubles. I went inside and brought out a small box I hadn't touched in 10 years. He walked off with 8 of them and said he might come back tomorrow. It was the kind of day where things move slowly but steady. I made small talk, told people about the rarer books, like the French edition of Les Miserables with the misprint on the cover, or my beaten-up copy of Fahrenheit 451, signed by a visiting Bradbury in '89. I wasn't rushing. I didn't need to. I even brewed a pot of coffee and brought it out in a thermos, sipping from a mug with my initials carved into the handle. It was just past 1 when I heard the crunch of gravel under tires. A red pickup rolled up. American-made, early 2000s, loud muffler. The door slammed, and 4 teenagers spilled out like they'd been shoved. 2 boys, 2 girls. Loud, laughing, not paying attention to the sidewalk. One of them, tall and skinny with a backwards cap, looked around and nodded once. Then they all moved toward my tables like it was a joke. No hello. No glance my way. I didn't say anything at first. People browsed in their own way. But right away, they were grabbing without reading. One picked up a Hemingway, opened it like it offended him, then dropped it face down. Another took a poetry collection and started flipping rapidly through it, rolling her eyes and scoffing loud enough for the others to hear. I stepped closer, not saying anything yet, just watching. They kept at it, laughing, tossing books back in the wrong spots. One of the boys picked up a thick edition of Moby Dick, stared at the cover, then slowly stuck out his tongue and exaggerated, licking his finger before turning the page. The girls cracked up like it was the funniest thing in the world. I cleared my throat and said, "Please be gentle. These books are older than you." "Yeah, no kidding," one of the girls said, and they laughed again. Then one of them, shorter, dark hoodie, phone in hand, lifted the device toward me like he was framing a shot. "You should promo this on TikTok, old man. You'll go viral or something." He laughed before I could answer. His thumb tapped the screen. The other boy dropped a small paperback into a puddle at the base of the sidewalk. I stepped forward, fast. "Hey, that's enough. Don't touch anything else." My voice came out louder than I'd planned. It made them pause. But just for a second. They weren't scared. If anything, they looked amused. The tall one raised both hands in mock surrender. The girl with the phone tossed another book, something leather-bound, into the same puddle. It landed with a wet thud. I moved around the end of the table and stood in front of them, between the books in their hands. "Pick those up. Now. Or leave." That was when the boy with the phone brought it closer to my face, maybe a foot away. "You mad?" he said, grinning. The screen glowed. I saw myself reflected in it, blurred, mouth tight, red in the cheeks. I stood still, trying not to let it show. I bent down to pull the books from the water, gripping the soaked corner of a paperback with 2 fingers, trying not to tear the pages. One of them, I didn't see which, kicked the puddle. Water splashed up in a sudden arc, landing across my shirt and face. Behind the screen, the phone caught everything. I took a step back, wiping my sleeve across my chest. They laughed harder. My hand went to the table, steadying myself as I reached toward the corner where I'd placed a first edition Elliot, wrapped in a plastic sleeve. As I leaned, I heard it. Wood creaking behind me. Not from my porch, but something rougher. I turned, fast. The big one, the tall kid in the cap, was holding a plank from one of the old construction pallets I'd left by the shed. A thick board with a nail sticking from one end. He raised it slowly, not fast, like he wasn't even thinking. Mr. Lewis, who'd been sweeping his porch next door, yelled my name. "Hey, enough of that! Put it down!" But it was already in motion. The board swung low, not like a bat, more like a shove with force. It caught me on the left shoulder and ribs, sent sharp pains slicing through my side. I don't remember falling, not the motion, just the snap. Ground suddenly in my face, gravel biting into my cheek, the wind knocked out of me. The sound of wood on flesh echoed somewhere, followed by a short burst of footsteps and laughing. From the ground, I saw the camera, still pointed at me, light blinking. The boy with the phone was holding it low now, but still aimed. My vision flickered in and out, like someone switching a lamp on and off in a dark room. Everything turned sideways. My arm went numb first. Then the rest of me followed. I woke up to the wail of a siren. The sky was whiter, too bright. Mr. Lewis was crouched next to me, pressing a rolled towel against my side. I could barely hear him. "Stay still," he said. "They're coming." His voice was tight. He looked around constantly, checking the street, the house, then back to me. The red pickup was gone. Just 2 long tire trails curving into the street, a dark stripe of rubber where they'd peeled out. The smell of gasoline still hung faint in the air. Someone, I think it was a jogger, stood near the mailbox, holding a phone, speaking fast into it. Paramedics rolled me onto a board and lifted me. Each movement sent a sharp jab through my ribs. The inside of the ambulance was cold and metallic. One of them asked questions I barely answered. I caught words like possible fracture and pulmonary contusion as they radioed ahead. My mouth tasted copper. At the hospital, they did scans, cleaned my shoulder and taped my ribs. The nurse told me to rest and not talk too much. I didn't want to talk anyway. Later, a police officer came to take my statement. He asked about the boys, about what started it, and if I knew their names. I didn't. Mr. Lewis had taken a video. Not of the whole thing, but enough. Starting right after the first splash, up through the moment the board came down. He handed it over. "Got lucky I was already filming them mess with the signs," he told the cop. "Didn't like the way they were acting." The next day, everything changed. Someone had posted the teens' footage online. I didn't watch it. I didn't have to. Mr. Lewis told me it was everywhere. "Old man gets wrecked," one caption said. People were laughing in the comments until they weren't. Within hours, names were being dug up. The pickup's license plate was visible in one shot. Police tracked down 3 of them fast. The 4th, one of the girls, turned herself in after her inbox flooded with threats. It flipped quick. Likes became backlash. Followers turned to attackers. Charges were filed. Group assault, vandalism, disorderly conduct, reckless endangerment. The DA went lighter than I wanted, but it was something. Community service, restitution for medical bills, and mandatory counseling. One of their parents came by later with an envelope. I didn't open it. I recovered. Mostly. Ribs healed slow. But some books didn't make it. Water, mud, and trampling ruined them past repair. I had to throw away a dozen, some rare. My old stack of Melville editions had pages like crumpled cloth. The Eliot had lines bleeding through the paper. I kept it anyway, out of stubbornness. Every time I walk past the shelf where they used to sit, I see the gap. The empty space where Moby Dick once leaned beside the wasteland. I'd organize by theme, man versus sea, man versus self. Now it's just air. A reminder. The video stayed online, of course. They clipped it, remixed it, slowed it down, called it Grandpa versus the Plank. My fall became a meme. I saw myself edited into cartoons, fight compilations, even a dance challenge. There's no stopping it once it spreads. Now I keep the garage door shut. Books stay inside. I move the best ones online. People can browse through a website, click, pay, no conversation. I mail them off in brown paper sleeves, padded and sealed tight. I don't miss the sound of laughter behind me. A like isn't worth a bruise. Content isn't worth a broken rib. People say kids don't read anymore. Maybe. But they still look. They just use a lens instead of eyes. Next person who wants a story? They'll have to read it for real.